Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my journey. Today, we are talking about a very important concept for personal growth and development, and that is fear. And we are going to explore that concept as well as friction in hopes of trying to utilize that to our particular advantage. So, without further ado, let's jump right in and let's get started. So, what is fear? At a baseline level, we have a physiological response to things that are dangerous to us. At a baseline level, this spikes our cortisol. It initiates our fight or flight response and drops in our adrenaline into our body so that we can fight, run, do whatever we need to in order to respond to the dangerous situation. Now, when we're talking about a true threat, this is a great thing, very evolutionarily important so that we can survive. But if we have a more illogical fear, then maybe it might not be the correct way to respond to a particular scenario. Say you're having a conversation with somebody close to you, your response when they bring up a elephant in the room kind of topic shouldn't be to run or fight. We need to deal with that in a particular way. So you can see that some fears are merited while some maybe we need to respond with a little bit more tact. And we're going to explore kind of different tiers of fears by looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I want you to think about fears as not having something on that list of needs. At the baseline level, we have physiological needs. He explains these things as air, food, water, shelter, ability to reproduce. These things are the basic necessities of life and are necessary in order to just exist at a baseline level. Now, moving up the hierarchy, we have things that have more societal value, have more communal value. It's not only about self anymore. We're starting to look at and explore other concepts of community and family. The next tier is safety. And these are things like personal safety, having your health and fitness, having a way to obtain resources like employment or, just bodily function. All of these things are necessary to procure those initial physiological type needs, and certainly very necessary in a environment where you can't just exist. You have to go out and do something to procure those needs. The next step is love and belonging. These are things like friendships, family, those kinds of things, more of a communal thing that allows a purpose to be given and starting to generate maybe a higher sense of what really matters to the self. The next two are esteem and self-actualization. Esteem is things like respect, self-concept, self-esteem, strength, freedom. These are things that we need in a truly sentient person who wants to make their own way in the world, doesn't want to be dictated on what they can and can't do. And certainly there are some legal safeguards of what we deem as a society as culturally acceptable to do and not do, but those are just guardrails when we talk about this concept. The last idea here is self-actualization and the desire and commitment to grow and develop over time. We're not the same as we were when we were born. We've learned, we've adapted, the times have changed, and so do we as we grow old and learn more and more things. And we experience more and more different things as well. We have to respond differently, and maybe we've learned from different experiences that a more tactful type response might be better than a more knee-jerk type reactive sort of response. So those are in general Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're going to pair those things with a lack of need, a lack of fulfilling that need in order to kind of understand fear in a little bit better light. So we're going to combine the top two and the bottom two tiers in the Maslow's hierarchy in order to kind of pick out three different levels of fears that we might have and use that to kind of discuss. So the top two are physiological and safety needs. And I want you to think about these in the perspective of fear as the fear of pain, the fear of suffering, and the fear of death ultimately. If we have enough pain, if we have enough suffering, more than likely that's happening to the body, and at some point the vessel will die. So those are kind of when we don't have a physiological need met. When we don't have food, we feel hunger, and hunger long enough can in fact damage the body. Thirst, lack of sleep, these things all kind of play in and negatively impact the person. So we have logically a fear associated with that, so we avoid having those things negatively impact us. The next level is love and belonging. Now, this takes us kind of away from the self and puts us more into a cultural context where more people are there. We want people that we love to love us. We want to have a meaningful connection with those around us and the culture that we live in ultimately as a whole. Now, the fear of disappointing a loved one or letting someone down in their time of need, these are more culturally type fears, and certainly may not have a direct impact on the well-being of oneself, but can certainly have a negative impact in the mental space and just sort of the way that we interact with our environment. So we want to try and avoid letting down others as best we can, to avoid disappointing them, letting them down, not fulfilling one of their physiological needs, perhaps if you're a parent or somebody with a pet out there. We want to try to avoid hurting the things that we love. The final two tiers are esteem and self-actualization. The fear of being dependent on someone can be paired with these two ideas. As we've kind of gone up the rungs of the ladder, we've baseline achieved what we need to survive. We have good connection with our friends and loved ones. We have now kind of like this life's purpose type idea. And when you don't have the three legs to stand on, you have maybe created a connection that somebody wants to fill in and help you create that third leg. Maybe you can no longer feed yourself because something that has happened to your arms or something has happened to your nervous system. Now you have to get your nutrition some way so that maybe a family member might help you and assist you. And that is the fear of being dependent on something, the fear maybe that you don't have the ability to make money for yourself to provide those baseline type physiological needs. So in this way, the fear of dependence kind of relies on another pillar, or maybe both pillars and the tiers underneath. And it can be very disabling for someone to think about, oh, I might not be able to provide for myself. I might not be able to do the things that I need to do. And that can be very scary. All of these ideas fall more in the line of logical fears, things that might be a little bit more tangible than others. All of these things fall in line of the more logical fears, whereas some might be more illogical that we have. Keep in mind that in terms of examples, it might be more tangible to not have food or more tangible to not have water in comparison to not having independence, and certainly cultural norms where you are in the world kind of depends on what these things might look like for you. But now I want to explore the idea of fears versus friction and how we can maybe callous or at least learn how to better respond to different situations that tend to give us fear. So I'm going to touch on two concepts next, kind of the stuck feeling, maybe when you have two competing fears that are on one side of the continuum from each other, and then maybe some fears that are maybe no longer as necessary evolutionarily. So let's take commitment in relationships as an example, and also the fear of being lonely. These are kind of higher conceptual things for us, not necessarily falling in terms of physiological needs, but both on either end of the spectrum and can lead the person to have a sense of stuckness, a sense of, well, I'm not sure I really want to commit to something, but I also don't want to be alone. You find yourself in this sort of limbo where you're unable to make a decision on what you truly want. And if you don't have an idea of, hey, this is the goal, it's very difficult to move forward. It's very difficult to commit. So think about those things. If you're stuck, you might break it down. What is the thing that you're fearful of? And maybe if there is another thing on the other end of the spectrum that you're fearful of, maybe take the scales idea. Which one are you worried about more? And take that approach and go towards addressing the thing that you worry about more, rather than just feeling stuck and not really knowing where you would like to take your actions. Now, the next thing we can discuss in terms of fears is like a phobia. So for me, mine is arachnophobia. It's not like I'm streaking and running across the room, but when I see a spider, it kind of like, the hair on the back of your neck kind of perks up and you get sort of like this adrenaline response of like, what is that thing? I want to get rid of it kind of deal. So there are spiders literally everywhere, all around us. There's probably one within 5 feet of me right now, but just not out in the open. So it's less important these days, evolutionarily speaking, because we have shelters and traps and all of these things that have been used to control and mitigate those spider, snake, things like that typically would be dangerous to us if we were just laying out on the ground, without a shelter. Those things would definitely be dangerous, but now they're maybe more so, and we just still have this knee-jerk response to react to something that maybe isn't that much of a threat anymore. Another thing that I tend to have, I would call more an aversion to, and maybe this kind of takes us into the friction discussion, is cold. And I grew up in Kansas, so there are 3 months out of the year where it definitely gets cold and there's snow and ice and you have to bundle up, and potentially could be really dangerous to be outside with the improper clothing on. And so now that I've been in Texas for a couple years, I've been trying to seek out cold via cold plunges, cold showers, walking around outside for a short period of time, maybe with less clothing on, in order to create maybe a calloused effect, or think about, trying to build up a tolerance for something. But keep in mind, that might just be who I am. I might just be somebody who doesn't like to be cold. But that's not necessarily a pass to not expose yourself to that. What we want to do is make a sort of graded exposure type response to a fear or something that we have an aversion to, so that we're better equipped to respond if we ever do perhaps put ourselves in a situation that particular fear or aversion is present. Now, in terms of graded exposure, we can really wind this back, right? You can really make this very low level exposure if you think about putting yourself in that sort of environment, and you're not not walking outside in winter, if we take the cold example, but I'm thinking about how it would feel if I dipped my toe in a cool body of water. And then you slowly start thinking about things that are more and more cold. Whereas the next step would be being in the same room with the phobia or the aversion, being in the same room with the spider. The next step is putting your hand in the box with the spider. And then, so you just sort of increase the exposure, turn the cold down further, and ultimately you're going to have a better ability to respond if you do have a quick sort of exposure just out in chance, out in nature. Say you're on a hike and a spider drops onto your arm. Instead of, knee-jerk reaction, it could be more and then deal with the threat, the insect, the arachnoid, in a less damaging way. Ultimately, we want to fight our fears so that we can become better and more tactful in conversation We can be less reactive. Keep in mind that you may truly never address a fear. You might always have that at some point, some level. But the difference between somebody who has exposed themselves to that particular thing, they know how to handle it. A dog is always going to have a fear response when they're backed into a corner, but if they've been in that experience before, maybe they know that if they bark like this, they can get whatever's backing them into the corner to think again before they can run off. The same thing, maybe like a seasoned soldier, there's always going to be fear of bullets coming at you because that can be really damaging. Now, somebody who's just experienced that a little bit more can have a clearer mind, pick the plan, what way is going to help get them out of the situation the best. And it's just that practice, that continued practice and exposure to these things that's going to really allow you to become calloused, become stronger, better, think more clearly in a situation that you might have fear from. So ultimately, we all need to be exposing ourselves to difficult things. I think fitness is a great way because not only is it a mental challenge, but you're also benefiting the body as well. So if you're looking for a way to get started, fitness is a great first step. People in the fitness industry are taking that to expand to heat and cold exposure, very similar type of beneficial stressor for the body. I think the research out there isn't quite ready to wholeheartedly support these things, but certainly, you want to kind of get in before maybe the evidence is really supportive of it. I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, we're gonna be exposed to heat and cold, so for lack of the research being there, I think it's a good thing to kind of have a mental callous to those things because those are real. If you go for a hike in the Sahara Desert, it's going to be hot. If you're up in Alaska, it's going to be cold. So these are these things that I think are really beneficial for personal development and beneficial in just being a robust, resilient human being. So thank you all for coming again to the conversation today. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. If you're interested in a coaching call and talking more about these kinds of things, please shoot me an email. Thank you all again for coming. Like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next one. Much love, fam, and keep moving.